Welcome back to the train room. We've got a trio of Dash 8s from Atlas to take a look at. So let's get right into it. I should note that the 727 and the 2466 are from the new release that just came out within the last few weeks, while the 2461 is from the previous run. So I'll be taking a little comparison and contrast between the two releases. So the Dash 8 from Atlas has been with us for about 20 years. That is a pretty long time for a locomotive to stay around and still get released. But over time there have been improvements and definitely changes that we've seen in this locomotive. And there is some differences between these two releases. So the first thing I want to take a look at are the exhaust vents. By the newer ones, they seem to have a thicker set of exhaust vents rather than the older one. That one seems to be a little bit finer in detail, and the hole is a bit wider, so not sure why there is a difference, especially that the older one seems to be better looking. But the horns are all different, they are all correct. This one really did have a P3, this had a P5, and this had an RS3L. So it is pretty cool that Atlas was able to get that down correct. The next few differences are pretty subtle, but once you notice them, you probably won't unsee them. First one has to do with the grab irons on the hood. On the newer ones, both of them, they have 6 grab irons here on the hood. The older one has just 4. You can't quite see it too well, but there is just one long piece connecting there, and the other one going all the way over here. But the correct one is the 6 piece that is on the newer ones. So that is a nice improvement. Now, another big improvement that these locomotives have is the lighting system. On the newer one, we take a look at the headlight here. We can kind of see like the headlight's a bit more angled. We can sort of see the bottom a bit more. It's just kind of tilted up a bit. But on the older run, it seems like the lighting is a bit flatter. It doesn't seem to sort of be tilted out as much as the newer run. These were never really a problem I've had with these, but the couplers have been replaced. So the newer ones have KDs, they look pretty good. Never really had a problem with the Atlas ones, but you know, they're pretty unsightly. Just seeing that, yeah, I'm not really a fan of the way that looks. It's kind of creepy looking. Don't often say that about couplers, but yeah, that's a difference there from the older to the newer run. The big draw to this release is the 2466. It's actually the second time that Atlas has released this locomotive, and the first time was nearly 20 years ago. And there's been a lot of changes to the real one, so of course there's a lot of changes to the model. And I think Atlas has done their homework on this. So let's take a look at some of the unique detailing this one has. 2466 is Ex-LMS number 729. Which is ironically one of the other LMS-8s that we can get from this new release. One of the things up front is that the LMS lettering that was there has been patched over. On the rear, that has been patched over as well. Some bigger differences here. The frame has been painted yellow. The air conditioning has been replaced from what I think is another CN-8, and the lettering font has actually changed over time, so this is the later one and of course has patched over the old font lettering. The fonts of the front number boards are different, and that is correct. As we just saw, this font is what the current side fonts are on the cab, but this is what the old font look like on the sides of the cab. The fonts on the rear have remained unchanged, however. And another difference is the paint. The The 727 has a deep blue because it's representing the locomotive when it was new. And of course the 2466 has a faded blue, which represents years of what it looked like up to that point. Pretty glad to see that Atlas has put out a Blue Devil in this Dash 8 release. It's been a very long time since they last have, so finding one is pretty few and far between. Now with that said, there's two caveats with that. The first one, and this one doesn't really bother me that much, but I can understand for rivet counters. The 2466 does look really good, and they've done their homework when it came to detailing this. But of course, the 2466, late in its career, with all of that, never looked this clean. Of course, it's going to be a pretty grungy locomotive with all the changes to its fonts and the paint and all that. Of course, it's going to be pretty filthy, but again, that's not really an issue with me. I really like the way it is as is. Of course, I like my locomotives clean, but that's just me. The other thing is, it probably is a little bit difficult for Atlas to put out another Blue Devil at a time, even though there were only a handful of these that ever existed. Each of them have some different detailing to them. So 2466, of course, was the last one that was in operation and has some pretty unique traits to it. There were some other ones that still had the LMS logo lettering on the front and the rear, and if they were able to put out another Blue Devil, I'd like to see them put out 2460 because that one has the CN noodle up front. So these subtle differences would be kind of cool to sort of collect over time, but I could definitely understand why they're only able to do one at a time. But either way, I'm glad they put out 2466. It's a very desirable model, and I'm really impressed with the detailing. Now that we got that out of the way, let's take these all to the tracks, and let me show you guys the differences in the startup from the old model to the newer one. So when I turned on the prime mover for the 2461, the number boards automatically illuminated. However, when I turn off the prime mover, they turn off as well. So I don't have the choice of wanting to turn on and off the number boards. On the 2466, of course, I had to activate them in order for them to be turned on, but when I want the prime mover off, I still have the choice of whether or not I want to have the operating number board. So I think that's an upgrade. Another one is the difference in the lighting. I don't know how well the camera picks it up, but if we look at the 2461, That one has sort of a dimmer but yellow lighting to it. While the 2466, it's definitely brighter and has a more white color to it. Yeah, that's absolutely an improvement. However, one thing to say is that the 2461 I thought had a better sound than 2466. I thought it had better clarity to it. I might have to play back the videos, but I thought that's the impression I'm getting. Now, one thing that is a big change on the 2466 is that we finally have operating marker lights. They will illuminate in the opposite direction of travel. So I have it set for forward, but if I were to change it to reverse, we now have them operating up front. Pretty cool to see that after all these years. And the rear marker lights will turn on when I have the locomotive set forward. So after all these years, I finally get to see them, and it's pretty awesome. Anyway, that'll pretty much conclude the review part of this video. I like to move on over to the operations side to have these locomotives pull a grain train. It'll look pretty fitting for them. So I'd like to thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you next time.